You're listening to Neurodivergent Mom Life, Unfiltered and Unstoppable, where we embrace the chaos, celebrate neurodiversity, and empower moms like you to thrive in motherhood.
Today's episode is a reflection on something I know many of us experience: coping, or sometimes a lack of coping. I'm sharing my personal journey of using escapism as a survival mechanism from my younger years all the way into adulthood. This episode dives into the ways that we, as neurodivergent individuals, often create worlds or seek online communities to find a sense of belonging when everything else feels overwhelming. I hope this resonates with you, and if you've ever felt like coping is an ongoing struggle, know that you're not alone in this journey. This episode was previously recorded, or was a previous live, I believe, on my then Instagram channel, where I was just kind of letting myself go, letting myself ramble on and on about things. And it was during a particularly difficult time of my life. So if that kind of stuff, just warning you, I guess, that this episode really isn't structured in terms of, a flow or anything like that. It's really just me talking and kind of rambling on about some things. So just bear with it if this episode is not your kind of thing, or, if it's really not your kind of thing, feel free to skip it. No hard feelings. So it's a mishmash today of the things that have been going on, not just that I'm seeing online and whatnot, but also in my personal life. I have a lot going on in my personal life. And I think one of the ways that I've been escaping it is coming in here and coming in on and being online. And it's been one of my coping strategies for as long as I can remember. Whenever things weren't going well in my personal life, when I was a young child, a teenager, and even now, I would always escape to another world. Whether that was my very elaborate fantasy world when I was a young child, or even as a teenager, or my alternate life, as people would call it. And then now, my biggest outlet is here. It's being in social media. It's being within a community of people who understand, who are like me, who I don't have to explain, or that I don't have to justify, or that I don't have to hide parts of me in order to fit in. And before, when everything around me was just falling apart, I was like, oh crap, what do I do now? What is it going to look like tomorrow? What is it going to look like 1 week from now? What is it going to look like 1 month from now? And I still don't have answers to those questions, just as far as what's going on in my personal life. I don't know what next week will look like. I don't know what next month will look like. Yeah, fantasy world's common neurodivergent thing. I really do think so. And I think one of the reasons that I escape to those fantasy worlds, again, whether it's this online space, but yeah, the fantasy worlds, as I was saying, especially as children, and I think even into our teens, 20s, and I still have my fantasy world now outside of this very real space. I think the places we can go where we don't worry, where we don't have to be masking, where we don't have to hide who we are, where we can just have that escape. And sometimes my fantasy worlds, that's what they are. It's just an escape from all the other thoughts and all the other emotions and all the other sensory things and everything else that's going on. I will be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but yeah, I will be okay. Yeah, see, online was, again, it was like the first place that I found a true sense of community, because it doesn't exist. Sometimes it just doesn't exist where we are in person. Or if it does exist where we are in person, hello, I'm socially awkward. I'm incredibly socially awkward. I hate starting conversations. I hate small talk. I have a tendency to overshare. I have a tendency just to, it's all those non-societal norms and all that other crap. And I don't always like meeting new people just because of previous experience. It's not fun. I don't enjoy it. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I meet people that I really connect with, and it's great. But I have a very small circle of friends. I have a very wide circle of acquaintances because if you've seen those, the one meme where it talks about circles of trust, that's about my circle of friendship. And there's very tiny circle and of people that I would actually call a friend, who know all sides of me, including that I'm autistic, that I have ADHD, that I've got anxiety, I have depression, I have crystals, I do pendulum readings, I do oracle card readings, I have tarot card readings. Yes, I collect Funko Pops. I don't care how old I am. That I read comic books, that I'm really into astrology, that I'm just all of these very quote unquote quirky things that sometimes it's just not acceptable, or that it's not expected for an adult to do, or it's not expected for me as I'm a church-going Christian, and yes, I have tarot cards, oracle cards, I believe in astrology. I do astrology readings, I do numerology. And yeah, there aren't, a point being, there aren't many people who know everything about me, because I want to be able to protect that to some extent, but I also, yeah, see, it's the rejection, right? Even in those communities and in those spaces where you're supposed to feel safe, where you're supposed to feel accepted, sometimes you aren't, and you get judged. Or, again, the whole rejection sensitive dysphoria kicks in, and then the overthinking kicks in. It's, can I really be myself around this person? Are they still going to like me? Are they still going to accept me? Are they still going to want to hang out with me? And I go through this constantly. And it's been like that for me since I was a child. The tarot and astrology, yeah. The judgment too. Oh my goodness. My self-esteem was in the hole. Really in the hole. And it was also because, it wasn't just because of the masking. It was a lot of because of the masking and the people pleasing and the wanting to be accepted and wanting to fit in and wanting to be liked and all of those other things. And all it was really doing was just really chipping away at who I am as a person, who I am as an individual. And I think once I just accepted that, which still takes a lot of work, that I don't need to be anybody but me. And the right people will accept me and care and be there in my life for who I am. Am I still going to make mistakes? Am I still going to think, oh my God, they don't like me anymore? Of course I will. It's just who I am. You have one friend, you're okay with that. You've accepted that your life. Yeah, see, I have my best friend. She and I have been best friends since we were 14. And she's the one person I think in my life who really does accept me and loves me wholly for who I am. We call each other, she's my lobster, if you ever watched Friends. But yeah, and we all need at least like that one, that soul person, S-O-U-L, not soul, S-O-L-E. You want to give a best friend energy. Yeah, it's the best friend energy. And yeah, I think it's not just, yeah, the best friend energy, best friend vibes, and having that one person there, or just having a circle of people, maybe not so much a circle, but at least having a few people that you can rely on and that you can just be yourself with. Oh my goodness, yeah, the RSD thing for me too is like this big giant eye opener. Like, holy crap, so that's what's been going on. And honestly, I thought everybody thought like that, so I didn't talk about it ever. And once I started reading more into it, more about it, not reading more into it, but reading, I already was reading into it and reading between the lines, and you know how it goes. But yeah, the biggest thing for me after the self-diagnosis with ADHD was oh my goodness, so many things were just, wow, that makes a lot of sense now. And then when I got the additional autism diagnosis, it's like, oh, things make even more sense now. And like I've said before, I would have been more than okay just stopping with the self-diagnosis. I'm pretty sure I would have gone after that self-diagnosis with ADHD with autism as well. Just because of the things that were not so much like that I couldn't explain, but things that I wanted to understand further. And seeking the diagnosis, the ADHD diagnosis to be specific, it wasn't about, oh my God, there's something wrong with me and I have to fix myself. It's never been about fixing myself. It's been about understanding the things and understanding the struggles. Because I knew I was struggling, like, in a big way that wasn't typical. And no wonder, I'm not typical. I'm neurotypical. Not neurotypical. Neurodivergent. Not neurotypical. I'm not normal. I don't have a normal brain. I don't have a neurotypical brain. I'm not. Yeah, exactly. I'm not just lazy. I'm not just procrastinating. I'm not just zoning out. It's because I legit can't do it. And it wasn't that I had to find out what was wrong. I just had to find out why it was happening. That's why I went after the self-diagnosis, or started that whole self-diagnosis thing. It was so I could understand why things were happening. Because once I understood why things were happening, I let my hyper-focusing kick in, and I let my hyperfixation kick in, and I went through on rabbit holing and Googling and looking up all these things. Oh, okay, so that's what this is. That's what I can do to help it. Let's try it. And I've tried so many things. Some have worked really well, and then other things were they were developed by neurotypicals. And as we know full well, things that work for a neurotypical person aren't always going to work well for a neurodivergent person, because our brains do not operate and function in the same way. It's just how it is. And so for me, it was adapting a lot of those things and those strategies that were already out there. I pursued the official diagnosis just in case I ever needed to go on medication. I was on medication for depression. I've been on medication for anxiety. And the medication that I was on for anxiety was Lexapro. I hated it. I hated every minute of it because I wasn't feeling anything. Like, I'd rather be my overthinking, feeling everything overly sensitive self than not feeling anything. And that's what happened when I was on Prozac and when I was on Celexa. So those antidepressants and the anti-anxiety medications have never worked very well for me. I didn't like the feeling that I had. The rabbit holing helped me in so many freaking ways because I could figure out what was out there, what was available as far as information. And the other big thing that helped me with processing the self-diagnosis and then the official diagnoses, which I'm noticing so many of us, we have both. We're autistic and we have ADHD. There's so much overlap anyway. Was joining Facebook groups for adults who are autistic or adults with ADHD. And those communities have been just, I can't say enough about how awesome they are. I love them. I was 14. I had my first boyfriend, and that did a big number on me. I look back on it now, I realize he was narcissistic and very controlling, very manipulative. And me being the rejection sensitive, people pleasing, dying for acceptance individual that I am, I lost a lot of myself. My self-esteem was really down in the dumps. And looking back on it, it just makes me realize it's no wonder. No wonder. Yeah, teenage years were really tough. Especially, and I'm not going to say especially for teenage girls, because it's not, I can't say that teenage boys didn't have problems. But teenage girls are one of the meanest little creatures in existence. And had it not been like for my best friend then, or even for a very small circle of friends that I did have, yeah, teenage, ugh, I wouldn't want to relive that ever. Yeah, teenage years were just bad. Although I gotta say now, I'm in my 30s, late 30s. 30s haven't been terrible. My 20s weren't terrible. We'll see what the next decade brings. But yeah, no, I'd never go back to my teenage years. People say, I've seen the memes around and everything, they're like, I wish I could go back to high school and do it all over again. Hell no. I don't want to go back to high school. I don't want to do that all over again. It happened. It's done. It's in the past. Let it stay in the past. Puberty in general, it does such a number to everybody. Hormones mess with your system in a big way, and then I think especially when it starts interacting with ADHD, autism, it does something else. I know there have been like scientific studies and research done with autistics that the onset of puberty sometimes brings on epilepsy or brings on seizures. And I know for me, the puberty piece, not just the puberty piece, but the hormone piece, being a female, my ADHD, my autism, it really does a number. Then having kids, it's like, oh God. I always got told, that's one of the things I've always carried with me, even before I knew I was a Cancerian moon or that I was I had projection sensitive dysphoria or all these other things. I've always been told that I was a very overly sensitive individual. Overly sensitive. And that my sensitivity or that my emotions were too much. You know what? Screw it. If that's how I am, that's how I am. I can't help that. I cry very easily. I have a very short temper, and it's not an explosive temper, but it is. I get angry pretty quick. It does, though, I will say this much, it takes a lot to offend me. I'm not sure why. I guess I shouldn't question that part. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Neurodivergent Mom Life podcast, Unfiltered and Unstoppable. And I hope that this podcast episode resonated with you. If it did, make sure to leave a review and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode.